Hi BookTube. As asked for in my opinion poll on my community tab, I'm going to give you my 2023 wrap-up. These are all the books I've read in the year 2023. I cannot show you here all of the books because some of the books I picked up from the library I work at, and several others also are from the bookshelf at my mother's home. This is my own private home. So these are the books from my bookshelf. I'll tell you when I cannot show you a book. Anyway, I will list all the books in the description, but I'm not gonna grab images from the internet and show them to you like this because, yeah, I'm a little bit lazy and I don't want to get copyright strikes. Anyway, by the way, I'm alone at my home now, so I'm taking the advantage to film this in the living room. I have all the books laid out here. So I'm going to read them out to you based on the order that I finished reading them. Okay, let's begin. The first one is Empire of Lies by Raymond Khoury. Now, this is an alternate history novel of what would happen if the Ottomans won the battle for Vienna, and there was a time travel element to it. I liked it a lot. It was fast-paced, and so yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm not going to say a lot of my thoughts because I think I expressed most of my thoughts in my reviews. So I'm just going to give like one or two thoughts per book, maybe. Next up is Resurrection Day by Brendan Dubois, which is also alternate history. What would happen if the Cuban Missile Crisis went hot? Unrealistic scenario, and the story was a little bit weird, where people did a lot of information dumping in their conversations, but still an interesting world to explore. I mean, I enjoyed the read despite how implausible it was. Next up was Trevayne by Robert Ludlum, which was a political thriller about a man who discovers the close ties between big financial interests and the United States government and military. It was very boring, but it did highlight the problem of money in politics. So I appreciated that. Yeah, I cannot show it to you because that one's from my mother's bookshelf. Okay, next up, the second and third books in the Myst trilogy. Myst, based on the computer video games. I liked them. I expressed my opinions on them in my review of the series overall, and it took me back to my childhood. It was great escapism. The writing was very friendly, and it explored themes of delicate balances in nature. I liked it. Next up is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Very sad, depressing, one of the sad horror books and one of the more disturbing books by Stephen King. And near the end I could see why. Near the end. Next up, The Matarese Countdown by Robert Ludlum. Another espionage thriller. This one interested me because it is almost 19 years removed from its 19 to 20 years removed from its original. This is a sequel. So I was wondering what it would be like bringing back heroes and villains from decades ago. The book mostly stands on its own, but you really need to read the first book to put things in context, and if you plan on reading the first book, but I'm not planning on reading it. The Matarese Countdown. I like the buddy cop dynamic in this book, so that was fun. So yes, this has been a good year so far for reading. There are a couple of stinkers here, but you'll see, I'll get to them eventually. Next is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. It's a very popular classic long poem about a prophet giving life advice to his audience. That's a book at my mother's home. It's okay. It's okay. There was some useful philosophical musings there. I did enjoy that. It wasn't as profound as I would hope it would be, though. Next is Sword of Vengeance by Marc Olden. This was my Garb August pick, which combined fantasy and crime noir, crime thriller. It was a fun ride. It was educational about the time period of 1990. And yeah, it was a fun and interesting, quirky little book for me to read during Garb August. Next up, The 11th Commandment by Jeffrey Archer, another espionage and political thriller. That one's on my mother's bookshelf as well. Yeah, that one was one of the earlier political thrillers. That one was a reread. It was the book that got me interested in dad books to begin with. It wasn't the first, but it was the one that really caught my attention of how much fun I can have with dad books, with airport novels. It's about an assassin who gets betrayed by his government. The United States government, by the way. So a CIA agent and assassin who gets betrayed by his government because of and then you see all the palace intrigue happening in the White House. That was a lot of fun too. Next up is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is a popular classic, but it was underwhelming because it was very short. But again, I can see why it was a classic. It was the first of its kind of showing that a utopia is really a dystopia. So there you go, Brave New World. Next up is The Sheik by Maggie Davis, which was also another Garb August book. That one was very boring. This is the first real stinker. I read it because I thought I might have a lot of fun wish fulfillment with people describing the high life of sipping champagne and eating caviar by the pool all day. But it was really a lot of boring economic jibber-jabber about the petroleum industry. I don't recommend that one. That one's the first truly thumbs down amongst the books that I'm talking about here. That's The Sheik by Maggie Davis. Next up is Mirror by Graham Masterton, which is only my second non-Stephen King adult horror. That one was fascinating. Not interesting. That one was fun. That had some gruesome, bloody fun. It was me dipping my toes into horror, and it turns out my tolerance level is pretty high. So I will hopefully next year read another couple of horror novels, but maybe only one Stephen King though, because I want to diversify and so on. Anyway, and be interesting and be different. Nobody wants another Stephen King book review. So I'm hoping it'll be another Graham Masterton book. Next up is Cloud Atlas, my one experimental novel of this year, which is like 6 seemingly unrelated stories from different times and places, and what binds them together is they're nested into each other. It's like a Russian doll setup. So it's in fascinating structure, and it's a little bit like a choose your own adventure book in the sense that the author challenges you to connect the dots. I found it very fascinating, and but I'm not entirely sure I got exactly what the author wanted. Wanted. And the film is not the masterpiece that the viewers rave about, but the book is much better. Next up, let's see here. The Book of Aliens by Bruce Coville. That's an anthology of alien short stories published in 1994. Bruce Coville compiled them, and he has several other anthology series for children. I read that in October. It took me only 4 days to finish. I've read faster in the past, but that one was the fastest book I read this year. Yeah, the stories were cute, but and some were thought-provoking, but nothing super special. Also on my mother's bookshelf, not here. Next up is A Clockwork Orange, another classic dystopia about mind control and the difficult question of how we deal with violence and crime. The language in it was hard to get around, and I wished I knew beforehand. In hindsight, I wished I opened up the glossary on Wikipedia as I was reading it. I made a mini review of that one. Nobody wants a full review of that one. YouTube is already saturated with them. Okay. And next up is A Matter of Honor, the second Jeffrey Archer book I read this year. That one was actually my first. That was a reread. That was actually the first political and espionage thriller that I read. And it was a very fast-paced and intense adventure. I was with the protagonist every step of the way. It was also a period piece, the 1960s. The book was published in the 80s, but it's set in the 60s. So that was fun. It was very fun. It was my first spy thriller. I'll be honest with you there. It was a reread, so it brought me back. Now, I'm doing a lot of rereads of these political and espionage thrillers in preparation for a reading event that hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be able to do next year. I might invite some co-hosts for all I know. But we'll see. Next up is Deadline in Jakarta by Ian Stewart. This is a political thriller set in my country. This was published in 1981. Review of this book coming up soon. Suffice to say, it was short, but how do I put this? Wish fulfilling, in the sense that we're telling my story. We're telling the story of my country. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Review of that book coming up soon. I already have it recorded. I'm actually doing batch filming. Thank you, Pax Panic. I'll always remember you. You inspired me to do batch filming. And then the last two books that I read that were from a haul I received earlier this month. The first one was End of Story by Louise Swanson. This book you must read. This is my favorite book this year. If there's any book that catches your attention, I really, really, really hope it's this one. So, read that one. It's a dystopia where in the future all fiction is banned, only non-fiction is allowed. It's about a former author who is being monitored by the government in case she starts writing again. And it explores various themes of grief. It explores the theme of grief a lot in there. I won't tell you any more. You have to go watch the review or read the book. But yes, this was my favorite book this year. Now, the last book that I read in this year was Through Darkest Europe by Harry Turtledove. A review of this book also coming up, also recorded. Yeah, it was okay. It's an alternate history of what happens with when the Middle East and North Africa switch with Europe. So Europe is the backwater for religious fundamentalism and poverty, whereas the Middle East and North Africa is the champion of human rights and modernity and technology and so on. So it was a fascinating world to explore, but the characters were cardboard cutouts. So I don't recommend this one unless you really, really, really want to know what the world is like. More information on this book in the upcoming review. That was my 2020 reading wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed. Okay, thanks for listening in. Goodbye, and a Happy New Year.